Alright, first I'm gonna start by showing you how to activate the border effect. You have to locate the layer property window, and in case you don't have it on your workspace, you can just go on window and then activate layer property right here. Then you have the layer property window open and it has a couple of effects that you can activate, but the one I'm going to talk about now is just this one, the first icon, which is a circle, and it's called the border effect. Click on border effect, and here you can see that it creates a silhouette around everything that I've made on this canvas. The line is of consistent thickness, which means that it's not gonna taper or get smaller with pen pressure. So for example, this is a very soft pen pressure, and then if I click harder, the line stays the same. After you activate the border effect, you have a couple of settings that you can play around with. First, there's the thickness of edges. The thickness of edges means that you can just change the thickness of the edge of the border effect. Make it as thick or as thin as you want it. Usually I prefer the 3 pixels, but it's easy to change, so it doesn't really matter. Then there's the edge color. The edge color means that you can just change the color of the edge only, not the drawing. And it's in real time, so you can see if it fits with the drawings that you have. Then there's the anti-aliasing border effect. That means that it can smooth the edge of the border effect, which means that if you have some curves like this, it's not going to look as jagged as if you don't have it on, like this. I prefer it on because it looks very smooth and I don't need to edit it later. Another type of border effect is called the watercolor edge, and I mainly use this one for coloring. As you can see, it doesn't really work that well when the lines are white, but if I change their color, you can see that it has a different effect. What it does is just it takes the edge of the lines that you've made and then it applies some effects to it, mainly darkness, opacity, blur, and the area that it covers. The main use of this is to mimic the effect of watercolor interacting with paper when it bleeds a bit around the colors. I usually reduce the darkness to a very minimal number so that it can have a very subtle effect. And you can just play around with it as much as you want to see how it works with your drawing. The first thing I'd like to show you is how to use the border effect to create laces, which will go across the line on top of the drawing I prepared. First, I create a new layer. Then I will add the border effect to it, and I will choose the color which is going to be white here to fit with the line art. After I do that, I select the brush that I'm going to use, and then I draw on top of the line art. As you can see, the laces are nicely separated thanks to the border effect. Now I'll show you a trick that I use to make sure that the laces don't look rough like this. First, I create a layer in which I draw a pattern using the decoration tool provided by CSP. With this tool, I can create a dotted line and I can change the gap between each dot to make it highly customizable. This will serve as a reference point for the laces later. Now that I have the references ready, I create a layer on top of it and draw the laces as I did before. I can keep going by crossing the lines I just made after flipping the canvas to make things easier for me, but as I've mentioned before, the border effect creates a silhouette which will unfortunately make the lines merge, creating this specific effect. If you're like me and you prefer the crossed laces to be clearly defined, then what you can do is duplicate the layer you just made. That way you can retain the border effect settings. With this duplicated layer, delete its contents by clicking on the icon here. Now that you have a fresh layer, you can just go ahead and draw the rest of the lines. As you can see, the laces look much better now. I've already added some screen tones to show how this would look in a black and white manga setting. As you can see, the white laces are clearly visible on top of everything else. Another pattern that you can easily make with this tool is something like this. To do this, we can create a new layer and make a single line. Keep in mind that we will be duplicating it multiple times, so it's best to draw it as cleanly as possible. We can then duplicate the layer and then transform it and move it into the position that you want it to be. I will do this 4 times. Now that I have 4 layers, I can select them and merge them. Please note that if you merge 2 layers that have an effect active, they will be rasterized first, which means that all separate contents of the layer, which can include vectors or effects, will be converted into pixels. That means that you will not have access to the border effect settings anymore, and both the drawing and its border will be merged. Now that I have the merged layer that has 4 lines, you can duplicate it, transform it, then flip it horizontally. In order to repeat the same pattern that we have here, we can control-click on the first layer's image, which means the white square in this situation. It will select all the pixels in it. Then you can go ahead and erase the parts from the second layer that should be below the first. And here you go. As you can see, I was able to make this pattern very easily without too much trouble. If you want to change the color of the white laces that you've already made, you can just select the layer that has the drawing, then go on Edit, Convert to Drawing Color. With this technique, you can choose any color that you'd like, and then modify the layer color as you see fit. If you want to color your drawing without the laces being white, which could cover the colors, the fastest way is to put the line art and the laces in the same folder, then set its blending mode to multiply, making anything that is white invisible. Thanks to this, you still have access to the laces as a separate layer with the border effect, which means you can edit them or add to them if you wish to. Let's talk about clothing patterns. Another way to use the border effect is to create clothing patterns like this one. This makes it easier to separate multiple complex elements and make it so that they can be managed easily. If I was to make the line art manually, I would have had to color everything manually, which could take some time depending on the complexity. If I had just used the border effect, then I can go into each layer and change its color like I've shown you earlier. If you want to draw more complex patterns, it is possible to use the tools available to you on CSP to make things go more smoothly. I start by setting a symmetrical ruler, then I draw some patterns. You can also use the shape tools or any other brushes to create some interesting patterns. You can of course use references or just have fun with it to explore the possibilities that are available thanks to this combo of tools. And don't forget to customize the thickness of the edge to your liking, which you can do at any point during the drawing. Now it's time to look at how to draw some hair. Using the border effect with a thin edge, I start by blocking out the individual locks of hair. Then I add some detail to them by adding stray hairs. I try to separate some parts of the hair in order to not lose any details around the edges. When it comes to hair accessories, I put them in their own layer so that they can be separate and be clearly visible compared to the rest of the hair. Now that I have the hair blocked out, I'll show you something that I like to do when I need to edit and refine the line art. With the border effect, I used white to block out the hair, which means that now I have a big section of the line art that is white. This means if I want to color underneath the line art, the white is going to be on top of it and I'm not going to see my colors. To fix this, I duplicate both the head line art and the hair folder, then I merge them together. After that, I go to Edit, Convert Brightness to Opacity. What this does is change the opacity of each pixel in the layer relatively to how white it is. In this case, the white of the hair will become transparent and the black of the lines will stay the same. Thanks to this, the line art is now properly transparent, which means I can color in a layer underneath it without any issues. and I can add some line weight and details to the hair to make it look prettier. As you can see, the hair looks nice and it only took me a few minutes to draw. Here you can see some examples that I did of sketches using the border effect. This concludes this in-depth tutorial about how to use the border effect in Clip Studio Paint. While I try to touch on multiple uses of the border effect, there are still many other ways to use it that I haven't talked about today. Anyways, that's it from me, and thank you for watching!